Good to see all of you this morning. We'll get to that text, actually. Probably not till the end. We'll see how it goes here. But anyway, good to see everybody. I actually had thought about preaching this last Sunday, and then with the handful of us that were able to get here, then I changed that idea earlier. Anyway, this is the sermon I put together actually a couple weeks ago, but wanted to come back and preach this morning right before all the snow hit. I don't know if you were like me, but I'm horrible about waiting too long. And so I went on the hunt of salt on Friday before the snow came on Sunday. And that was not a wise choice of mine. Now, actually, I think they actually stocked after that. But anyway, and so I walk into Ace up here at the hardware store. I'm looking anywhere, right, that I can find some salt. And I walked in the door, and I just almost looked with complete doubt in my mind and asked, "Do you have any salt left?" And the girl very apologetically said to me, "No, I'm so sorry. We've sold out of all the salt we had." And I looked at her and I said, "Not your fault, the procrastinator's fault." Right? I didn't value time in the way that I should. I assumed that I would have enough time to get all of the things necessary that needed to be prepped and ready so that we could be prepared to deal with snow at home and snow here at the building and snow wherever it was going to be, which is apparently everywhere right now. And we struggled trying to value what is the most important thing in a particular moment in time. And so I got to thinking about that after that conversation with the young lady up at the Ace Hardware and began to think, how often do we consider how valuable time is? Because time comes and goes so quickly, and you can't buy it back, you can't transfer it, right? You can't do anything to retrieve the time that's already been lost. And so this morning, if you would with me for a little while, let's just talk about the idea of learning to redeem the time that we have. How do we make it precious? How do we place the proper value on it? How do we use it in the ways that God would desire for us to do? And so if you would, with just a few minutes, what I want to do, a little different than what I might normally do in sermon form, but I want to just walk you through a handful of texts, and then I'm going to make some application of them. And so just walk with me through a handful of key scriptures that deal with the idea of time. And let's start in Psalm 39. I'll get back to that Ephesians text here in just a little while. But start with me, Psalm 39, and let's just look again at some just what the Bible has to say about the conversation we're having this morning about the importance of time. And the psalmist wrote here, a Psalm of David, verse 4 of Psalm 39. He said, "Lord, make me to know my end." I thought about that a lot, right? I don't know that I want to know it literally, right? It's sobering to think about. I don't think that David's trying to say, help me know my it, when my life is, let me know it literally. And I don't think that's his point. His point is, give me a mind that considers the fact that I have an end, right? That my life isn't continually perpetual. That my life eventually will have some end to it. And I don't know that the psalmist wants to know the details of that end. He just wants to recognize that life is brief. It's oh so brief. And even in the last few weeks, we've been reminded of that, haven't we? With several circumstances and situations among families. What is the measure of my days? That I may know how frail I am. Lord, David says, Lord, help me know that life isn't forever. And help me know the longer I go, the frailer I get. The longer I go, the more challenging it is to use the time that I have. The longer I live, the more difficult it might be for me to redeem the time in which I have. So give me a mindset presently, David says. Help me understand right now how brief, how challenging, how frail life can be, and help me measure the time that I have accordingly. Indeed, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my age is as nothing before you. Certainly every man at his best state is but vapor. We're going to see that in James here in a little while as well, aren't we? Friends, time is fleeting, and I'm not trying to preach this from an overly sober standpoint, although it is sobering to consider the thoughts here, but I'm just trying to get us to recognize that time is a valuable commodity, if you will. Time is precious. It's important. The psalmist David records that for us in very vivid and sobering kinds of language. Jump over to Psalm 103. Psalm 103 in verse 15. Psalm 103, verse 15. As for man, again another psalm of David, as for man, his days are like grass. As a flower of the field, so he flourishes. For the wind passes over it, and it is gone. Its place remembers it no more. Life is short. Time is brief. I can remember, I graduated in 1987 from high school. Any of y'all remember 1987? Some of you weren't even born yet. Right? I can remember in 1987, people were already starting talking about the Y2K problem. You remember that? When every computer on the face of the earth was going to crash because it wouldn't know the difference between the year 2000 and the year 1900. Y2K. Remember that? And I can remember being a high school student, graduating high school, 1987, 17 years old at the time, hadn't turned 18 yet before I graduated. And I can remember thinking, wow, the year 2000, I'll be old. And here we are, 2026. Not 13 years past that day when I thought I would be old, but 39 years later. It's a blink, isn't it? It is an absolute blink. You think it's so far off. I'll be in my 30s. And it's gone. Our days are numbered. They're brief. The psalmist David reminds us of that. In Psalm 90 and verse 10, it is said, if by reason of good health, right? Our normal span of expectation might be 70 years. But if reason of good health, maybe 80. And I don't say this with any humor whatsoever, but there are a lot of you in this building that recognize that, don't you? You recognize the sobering thought of Psalm 90, verse 10. And many of us are drawing closer and closer to understanding the benefit of 70, or if by reason of good health, 80. Again, I'm not I'm pressing the life out of you. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to get us to look at these texts of Scripture and etch into our minds how little time we really have. And if time is so small, how important it is to prioritize and value it in the manner in which we redeem it and use it. And what purposes that we have in mind. There's that James text, right, in James chapter 4. James is just reminding us of what the psalmist had already said. But he's reminding his audience of that reality. When he says, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Time is fleeting. And the manner in which we value it is important. So now, I said at the end, I deceived you a little. It's more in the middle. But go to Ephesians 5 now, the text that Todd read a little while ago. Now, I apologize to Todd. It took me forever to learn how to say circumspectly as well. That ain't a fun word to have to say. But notice verse 15. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Redeem, value, right? Value the time that we have, because there's a lot of things that are going to come your way. There are a lot of things you're going to have to address in life, and if we don't prioritize the time we have, then we're going to miss out on a lot of things that are important. And it's not on the chart, but keep reading with me, the more of the context that Todd read, because he tells us what we ought to be doing with our time, right? He reminds us, walk circumspectly, redeem the time. You don't know how much of it you have. That's the premise. Therefore, here's what the conclusion should be based on that. Here's what we should be thinking as it relates to the fact that time is short. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. What the will of the Lord is in relationship to what? In relationship to redeeming the time. Right? Understand what the will of the Lord is when you're valuing time. So don't waste it with drunkenness. That's what he said. Do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. Why would you want to squander time away in a state, right, in an intoxicated state where we don't even know time at all, right? That's his point. Do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipate, just waste it away, but be filled with the Spirit instead. It's interesting, right? We jump to verse 19 of Ephesians chapter 5, and we often talk about it in the idea of a cappella music, right? Fair enough. But that's not the conversation, right? That's not the context of Ephesians chapter 5. His effort here in Ephesians chapter 5 is to not create a doctrine, if you will, as it relates. That's not his point. He makes the authoritative point, but that's not the conversation. The conversation is, what should we be doing with our time? Don't be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation. Fill yourself with the Spirit, I believe. Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. You want to find something redeeming about time? How about spending it in praise and adoration to the Lord? Why not spend it in time speaking in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs? Using your time wisely to bring praise before the throne of God and to edify and encourage the hearts of those that are around. How about spending it giving thanks, verse 20? Always for all things to God the Father in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. How about helping one another and submitting and encouraging one another? How about that as a valuable way to spend our time? How about spending it in fear of God? That's the point of Paul here in Ephesians chapter 5. He's trying to remind us in the early part of our reading, redeem the time because the evil days are coming. That sounds a lot like Ecclesiastes, by the way, doesn't it? We'll get there, trust me. In about 5 minutes we'll be there. But there's ways to spend time that are valuable. And generally speaking, the Bible points us to spending that time in spiritual context and in praise and appreciation for the God of heaven. So with that backdrop, can I share just for a few minutes some practical things I think we should consider? In light of that knowledge that we've just gained in those 5 or 6 verses, how precious is time to us? How urgent is it to us? The Ecclesiastes writer said this, Ecclesiastes 11 verse 10. He said, "Therefore remove sorrow from your heart Time is too precious to waste it on things that hurt you. Right? That's what he's saying. So quit doing things that are hurting you and bringing sorrow to your heart, and things that are hurting your body. Put away evil from your flesh. Sinful things, things that are contrary to the image God has created us in. Don't waste your time on that. Why? Because childhood and youth are vanity. They're going by quickly. Each day you get about 24 hours, right? And you can't transfer it, you can't save it to another day. All you can do is use what we've been given. Those moments are going by fast. Challenges us to manage our time wisely. It means we've got to prioritize what truly matters. And it reminds us to understand the urgencies of life. How do you prioritize what's necessary then, right? What do you think of as necessary with my time? Well, here's an interesting statistics, by the way, just to share some things with you. Do you realize the average person spends if they have an average lifespan, 1,086 days sick? Over 3 years of your life. And that's just normal, right? That's just an average. That's a lot of time that's gone out of your control in some ways. 4 years preparing and eating food. Many of us mostly eating. Right? Isn't that, wow. I mean, we don't think of it that way, right? We just think we spent some of the day, but when you add it up, over a lifespan, there are certain things that are necessities, right? You have to eat to survive. You're going to be sick sometimes, and you can't. So my point is, friends, some of our life and time is spent, and there is no control over it. It just has to happen that way. So now, not only is life fleeting, not only is it a vapor, not only is it vanity, not only is you, right, not only all those things that we just read are true, but now I've got to even prioritize in greater ways because there's a lot of things out of my control that are taking time away. But soapbox preacher for a minute, can I share with you some other statistics that are interesting? Because I notice I put the question mark after time necessities. The average American spends 4 to 6 hours a day on their phone. Now, I said average. You're going to come out. There's going to be somebody that's going to come out of this building this morning and go, I don't even have a phone. Good for you, right? Good for you. But I'm giving you statistical averages. Even boomers. You don't even know what that means, do you? That's what my children call me, but I'm not a boomer, by the way. But let me show it to you. I created a chart. Well, AI created a chart. In case I use references, you don't know what it means. So if you hear people talk about Generation A or Generation Alpha, that's kids today. Born roughly 2013 to 2025. The old paper talk about Generation Z, 1997 roughly. And people argue these years a little bit here and there. Millennials born in 1981 forward. Gen Xers, that's me, right? Born 65, later. Then the baby boomers. Those were all the children born after World War II. When the troops all came home, and there was a boom in birth of children. And so that generation is known as the baby boomers. I didn't realize this. There's a period of time they call it the silent generation. The folks born in 1928 through 1945, they didn't do much. they don't make a lot of noise in history, and so they call them the silent generation. And then those that were born in 1901 and through 1927, they're the ones that went off and fought World War II and fought and lived through Great Depression and all that kind of thing. They become known as that greatest generation. Now, I share that with you to educate a little bit in case I use a phrase you don't understand what I'm talking about, but also to recognize that as you go from the bottom of this chart, very few, only about 2 million at the time of this chart of each of these, right? That's what the number is on the right. How many millions of those groupings are there in America? But as you move from the bottom to the top, the amount of time on technology infinitely sharpens how much time, right? So you might say, well, I was born in 1936 or 39 or 40, and you say, I don't even hardly have a phone, right? I got one. Well, yeah, you're shrinking that average, right? You're shrinking that average because you don't spend maybe as much time. But then that very next one, the baby boomers, and there's some of you here, right? 46 to 64. Even the baby boomers are spending 2 hours a day. 187 clicks on your phone once every 5 minutes. Now, again, these are statistical averages. The younger the generation, the multipliers go up of how much time is spent. The older the generation, those numbers will go. You average them out, and this is what you come up with. What's your point, preacher? My point is that's an awful lot of time. That's an awful lot of time. And I don't know that we realize it, right? Because this is what we do, right? And I say we, I'm including myself. There are days I do the same thing. We've got the phone, right? And it's sitting right beside us. And you know, there's a 30-second break in life. And what do? Open it up. We quickly get to our favorite social media app, and we scroll. And we scroll. And we scroll. And then we say, but I put it away. Yeah, you put it away for 5 minutes. And then you picked it back up. And you scrolled and you scroll. Now again, there are a lot of folks sitting here, you older generation. If you're that silent generation, or if you're a baby boomer, you may not. 187 clicks a day. But even that group is 2 hours. Friends, we've got to be careful. Right? We got to be careful. Now, maybe you're using technology for good things. You know, a lot of what I do preaching happens technologically. And I spend hours and hours and hours editing and putting things together and making sure things are working properly, right? The technology isn't the evil here. But if it's robbing us of valuable time that we could be doing in more spirit-minded things, then we're making a horrible mistake. And preacher soapbox, I'll sound like I'm 90 for a second. We are ruining a generation who don't know how to interact with people, who consume nothing but digital media. And it's not wrong within itself. It becomes wrong when it's just used all the time. And it can become a cesspool of sin and depravity that is infiltrating the minds of our young people. And dare we never say, not my kid. Right? It could be my kid, my child, who gets caught up in that technological world And I don't have to stand before you today and give you anecdotal evidence. I could. Of young person after young person after young person after young person whose lives were destroyed because of the hours and hours and hours spent. Time wasted. So parents, be careful. Be wise. Because too much of our time is wasted by. And it's too scarce. One last thought for you. I had some other things. I'll stop. But I saw this statistic. I thought it was interesting. At age 35, you may have approximately 500 days of discretionary time left. When you take away sleeping, working, basic chores that you have to do, eating, brushing your teeth, right? That's sobering. And it emphasizes the need and the importance of maximizing every moment for meaningful pursuits and spiritual growth. We are not valuing time in the way we should because we assume that even if I get the 70, even if I get the 80, I got lots of time. When the reality is, when you take away work and you take away necessities, you take away chores and things you have to do, there's not a whole lot of time left. Let's use it the best we can. Let's use that time in the best way possible. I've preached lessons on valuing time in the past, and every single one of them, I turn it into the most depressing conversation. But it's just a sober reminder, right? It's a sober reminder. Don't squander it away. Value it. Treat it as precious. It's more valuable than gold and money and monetary possessions. It is something that we should respect every single moment and use every single one of them to the best of our ability to fulfill the purposes that God has given us. And those purposes are vast, right? We have purposes in our families. We have purposes that God has given us to our neighbors. We have purposes God has given us in society. We have purposes God has given us before His throne. All of those purposes God has given require time. And spirit-minded, spirit-filled people will use that time for spiritual mindedness and the godliness that God has described for us. Value every moment because they're precious and they're fleeting. You're subject to the gospel in some way this morning. Can we encourage you to step into God's promises? Time's fleeting. We've evidenced that this morning. Time is short. We've got to focus on what's important and what's in front of us and the promises God has made through Jesus. Have you been baptized into Christ for remission of sins? Have you experienced what it means to repent and change and turn from those sins? To confess Jesus as your Lord? To confess that you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Are you determined to live connected to Him and faithful to Him? And maybe you've stepped away from that, and we can encourage you or pray for you this morning. Will you redeem the time that we have? And if you're subject to the gospel in some way, won't you come as we stand?